My neighbor intercepted me at the elevator. Do you know who comes to your house every single Tuesday? I had a hidden camera installed, and I couldn't believe my own eyes. I can still remember the sound of the elevator doors from that morning, a soft, metallic sigh. It was as if the building itself had grown tired of holding all its secrets. I was heading to work, coffee in one hand, my keys in the other, when our neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, seemed to appear from out of nowhere. She was always the type who knew everyone's business, elegant in a way that left you feeling underdressed. Her hair was in a neat silver bun, her lipstick a shade too red for mine in the morning. "Good morning, Emily," she said, and her smile never quite reached her eyes. "Can I ask you something personal?" I hesitated. "Sure, what's wrong?" "Do you know," she said, leaning in slightly and lowering her voice, "who comes to your apartment every single Tuesday afternoon?" For just a second, I thought she must be joking. I even let out a laugh, a small, confused sound. "What? What are you talking about?" "Oh, I'm sure it's nothing," she said quickly. But her expression didn't match her words at all. "It's just, I've noticed someone entering your place while you're gone. Every single Tuesday. I thought perhaps you had a cleaner, or maybe a friend dropping by." My fingers tightened their grip around my coffee cup. "No, no one has a key except for my husband and me." She nodded slowly, as if she were confirming something she already knew. "Well, maybe you should check. You can never be too careful, dear." Then the elevator arrived and she disappeared inside, leaving me alone with that sentence echoing in my head. All day long at work, her words gnawed at me. I replayed them between emails and phone calls, trying to convince myself it was all a simple misunderstanding. Maybe she had mixed up the apartments. There are 3 identical doors on every floor after all. Maybe she saw my son Daniel visiting to pick something up. But Daniel lives across town, busy with his new wife Lauren. He hardly ever comes by anymore. When I got home that evening, I stood in the hallway for a long, long time, just staring at my door. Everything looked perfectly normal. The lock, the doormat, even the faint scent of lavender from the air freshener I'd left last weekend. Inside, the apartment was spotless. Too spotless, even. I went room to room, checking drawers, doors, closets, like a fool chasing after shadows. There was nothing missing, nothing out of place. And yet, I couldn't shake off this feeling that someone had been here. That night over dinner, I told my husband. He barely even looked up from his plate. "You're taking that woman far too seriously," he said. "You know exactly how she is, always spying, always gossiping. I bet she just wants a little attention." "Maybe," I murmured, but the unease didn't fade. Mark reached across the table, took my hand briefly, then pulled away to check his phone. "Forget it, Em. You'll just drive yourself crazy." But I couldn't. Not after the way Mrs. Caldwell had looked at me, with an expression that was almost pitying. By the weekend, simple curiosity had become a full-blown obsession. I found myself searching online for cheap security cameras, reading reviews late at midnight. Finally, I ordered one. A small black device, easy to hide and motion activated. When it arrived, I set it up near the entryway, angled toward the front door. I told myself it was just for peace of mind. Nothing more than that. Tuesday came far too quickly. I went to work as usual, trying to focus, pretending I didn't care. But by the time I got home, my pulse was racing. I poured a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and opened the camera app. The timeline showed a single motion alert, 1:13 p.m. My throat went completely dry. I pressed play. The front door opened. Someone stepped inside slowly, confidently. I froze. The figure moved into the light, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. It was Lauren, my son's wife. Her long, blonde hair was tied back, her hand clutching a small tote bag. She looked around, as if making sure no one was home, then walked straight toward the bedroom. I watched, paralyzed as she opened my dresser drawer. She wasn't stealing anything. She was placing something inside. A small envelope. Then she took out a bottle of perfume, sprayed it once into the air, smiled this faint smile, and left. The video ended, but I couldn't move. The sound of my own breathing filled the silence. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Why would Lauren come here? And why always on Tuesdays? I wanted to confront her right then, but something stopped me. A strange, instinctive fear. Instead, I replayed the video again and again. Her expression wasn't guilty. It was calm, deliberate, like someone who was following a set routine. That night, I hardly slept a wink. Every sound in the apartment felt wrong. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock. I lay there beside Mark, who was already asleep, his phone glowing faintly on the nightstand. My thoughts spiraled. What if he knew? What if they both knew? By morning, I had convinced myself there had to be an explanation, a misunderstanding, a reason that would make everything make sense. Maybe she was leaving a note for Daniel. Maybe she thought it was his place. But when I checked the drawer where she had placed the envelope, my heart just stopped. It was gone. Completely gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring down at my hands. The air felt heavier, somehow thicker. I realized something terrifying. Someone had come again after she left. Someone who knew I'd be looking. When I passed Mrs. Caldwell in the hallway later that day, she smiled, that same bright smile. "Everything all right, dear?" she asked sweetly. "Yes," I managed, forcing a smile back. "Everything's just fine." She tilted her head slightly, her eyes as sharp as glass. "Good. I'm glad you're keeping an eye on things." As the elevator doors closed behind her, I felt it, the first real stab of fear. Not the fear of what I'd seen, but of what I hadn't yet discovered. The next morning, the world felt colder. The sunlight through the curtains was pale and distant, as if it too didn't want to touch me. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into my untouched coffee. The video from yesterday was still looping in my head. Lauren's calm face, her deliberate movements, the soft click of the drawer, the envelope that had vanished. Every single frame was burned into my memory. Mark came out of the bedroom half-dressed, humming to himself. He looked at me, smiled absently, and said, "You're up early." His voice sounded perfectly normal. Too normal. I searched his face for something, for anything that might betray guilt or fear, but he looked exactly as he always did, the same man that had shared my life for 23 years, the same man who had once held my hand through miscarriages, mortgages, and my mother's funeral. "Did you sleep at all?" "Not much." "You worry too much, Em. You always have." He kissed the top of my head and left for work. The moment the door shut, I exhaled. A long, shaky breath, like I had been holding it all night long. I looked around the apartment. The walls that had once been a comfort now felt like strangers. Every photo frame, every piece of furniture suddenly seemed like evidence in a life I didn't understand anymore. I played the video again, then I rewound it, slowed it right down. At one point, right before Lauren left, she turned toward the bedroom mirror and she smiled. Not the friendly daughter-in-law smile I'd seen 100 times before, but something quieter, more satisfied. It was almost intimate. I couldn't stop the thought that followed. She wasn't alone in this. The idea was too big to face all at once. I paced the living room, my hands shaking. I opened the bedroom closet, checked the drawers again. Empty. The envelope was gone. But the space it left behind was worse than anything physical. It was the absence of trust, of safety. By noon, I'd stopped crying. Something inside me had gone still, and that stillness felt powerful. The grief had burned itself into a cold clarity. I went to the computer and opened a new folder, Tuesday files. Inside, I saved the video, renamed it
Record 1. Then I copied it to a flash drive and hid it in the lining of my coat pocket. For hours, I sat in silence, making lists of people who had access to the apartment, the exact times Mark said he was at work, the schedule of Lauren's classes at the university where she worked part-time. I wasn't a detective. I was just a middle-aged woman with trembling hands and a lifetime of routines. But suddenly, that routine was a weapon. I knew everyone's habits. I knew what time Mark's car left the driveway, what days Daniel called, what Lauren posted on social media. I could trace them without them ever knowing. I checked my phone. Old texts, messages, photos. In one from 2 months ago, Lauren had written, "Thank you for trusting me with the spare key. It's so much easier to pick up Daniel's stuff on Tuesdays." Tuesdays. The word twisted inside me like a knife. I remembered that day. How she'd come over with the pie, smiling, saying Daniel forgot some old boxes. How Mark had encouraged me to let her have the key, saying she was family now. And I'd smiled, feeling proud to be such a generous mother-in-law. Fool. The realization came not like thunder, but like a slow, steady cut. They were all lying to me. Mark knew. Lauren came here because he let her, maybe even invited her. The thought didn't make me scream. It didn't make me throw anything. It just made me quiet. That night when Mark came home, I watched him the way you'd watch a stranger on a train. Curious, detached, studying his every single move. He talked about work, dinner plans, a possible trip to visit Daniel next month. He didn't notice that I barely spoke. "You're looking pale," he said finally. "You sure you're okay?" "Just tired," I replied. And for the first time in our marriage, the lie didn't taste bitter. It tasted necessary. After he went to bed, I sat alone in the dark living room. The city hummed outside, distant and uncaring. I looked at our wedding photo on the shelf, Mark's arm around me, both of us smiling like we believed life was unshakable. I felt nothing. No love, no hatred, just the hollow clarity of truth. It wasn't about revenge yet. Not fully. It was about reclaiming control of my own home, my own mind. They thought they could make me doubt myself, like I was some fragile woman losing touch with reality. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. I wrote in my notebook slowly, deliberately, keep pretending everything is fine. Gather proof, not emotion. Proof. Do not confront until ready. It was the first plan I'd made in years that was entirely for me. I went to bed at 2 a.m, my body exhausted but my mind sharp. As I lay beside Mark, his soft snoring filling the dark, I realized I was no longer afraid of him. Not of what he could do or say or hide. The fear had changed its shape. It was now a kind of focus, precise, calm, and waiting. When dawn came, I felt different. Not lighter, not happier, but solid. My heart still ached, but the ache had direction. I looked in the mirror at the lines around my eyes, the tired woman staring back. "You're not crazy," I whispered to her. "You're waking up." That day, I deleted the video from my phone. At least, that's what Mark would see if he checked. The real copy was safe. I even smiled at him over breakfast, asked about his meeting, kissed his cheek before he left. It was almost easy, this new role, the calm wife, the trusting woman. But underneath, a different version of me was growing, quiet, calculating, determined. He had no idea that the woman standing in front of him wasn't his wife anymore. She was the beginning of his reckoning. By the following week, my fear had turned into something else. Precision. I moved through my days as if rehearsing a performance. Every smile, every nod, every casual phrase was a line in a script only I knew. Mark didn't suspect a thing. He still kissed me on the cheek every morning before work, still texted the same dull updates. "Running late. Don't wait for dinner." If he noticed my sudden quietness, he didn't show it. Maybe he thought I'd gone numb, or that age was softening me into passivity. That was his mistake. Tuesday came again. I worked from home that day, pretending to have a mild cold. I set up the camera in the same place, but this time, I added another. A tiny one, hidden behind the bookshelf, facing the hallway. Then, I left the apartment at noon, locked the door, and drove around the block. My hands were trembling, but my mind was sharp. I parked near the cafe across the street and waited. For 40 minutes, nothing happened. Then, at 1:12 p.m., I saw her. Lauren. She arrived in her little white car wearing that same soft pink sweater she always wanted to look harmless. She walked into the building with a key, my key, dangling from her hand. It was one thing to watch it on video, another to see it with my own eyes. A sick wave rolled through me. Disbelief, humiliation, fury, but beneath it all a strange satisfaction. Now it's real. I waited until she left 20 minutes later, then went back upstairs. My pulse was hammering as I unlocked the door. The apartment smelled faintly of her perfume. Floral. Synthetic. Cloying. I checked the dresser again. Another envelope. This time I opened it. Inside was a photo, old from maybe 10 years ago. Mark and Lauren at a family barbecue, standing too close, his hand on her shoulder. I remembered that day. Daniel had been in the house fetching more drinks, and I'd thought nothing of their laughter.
Now I looked at the photo and saw everything I'd missed. On the back, written in her neat, round handwriting, "Some things never change." My breath caught. I sat down on the bed, the picture trembling in my fingers. This wasn't just an affair. This was a message. I took photos of the envelope, the handwriting, the time on my phone, then I placed it all back exactly as I found it. If she wanted to play games, I'd let her, but I'd be the one to start. That evening, I visited my friend Susan. She works at a small law office downtown, mostly handling estate cases. We'd met years ago through a book club, and though we weren't close anymore, I knew I could trust her to be discreet. Over tea, I told her everything except the affair. I framed it as someone entering my home without permission. She frowned. If you've got evidence, you can file a report. Unauthorized entry is a serious thing. Even if I gave them a key? If they're using it for something you didn't agree to, yes. She leaned forward. But think carefully before you involve the police. Once it starts, you can't undo it. Her words stuck with me on the drive home. I didn't want the police. Not yet. This wasn't about the law. It was about truth. My truth. That night, Mark was home early, unusually attentive. He made dinner, poured wine, told me he'd been thinking we should take a weekend trip, just the two of us, to reconnect. His timing was impeccable. I smiled faintly, nodding. That sounds nice. But inside, something twisted. Was this guilt or strategy? After he fell asleep, I opened his laptop. He was careless. Same password for everything. I found his email, scrolled through months of messages. Most were work-related, but then I saw one labeled private. My heart pounded as I clicked. It was a draft, unsent. Elle, I think we should slow down. She's starting to notice things. Last Tuesday was too risky. Let me handle it. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the screen blurred. Lauren. He hadn't sent it, but he had written it. He had thought it. That was enough. For a moment, I just sat there staring at the glowing screen. The man I'd shared my life with was reflected in the dark window beside it. My body felt hollow, as if every organ had turned to glass. Then something inside me hardened. A slow, deliberate shift. I copied the draft, emailed it to myself from an anonymous account, and deleted every trace. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The world outside looked clearer somehow, sharper. I made coffee, fed the cat, smiled at Mark when he came into the kitchen. "You seem better today," he said. "I am," I replied. "I think I just needed some rest." He kissed me, picked up his briefcase, and left. The moment the door clicked shut, I felt an almost electric stillness. This was the first morning I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like the one in control.
I spent the next hours gathering everything: the videos, the emails, timestamps, screenshots, even the photo from the envelope. I created a folder on a new USB drive and labeled it Proof. Then I locked it inside a small metal box under the sink behind cleaning supplies. By noon, I was ready for my next move. I called Daniel. He sounded distracted, impatient. "Hey, Mom, I'm at work. Can we talk later?" "It's about Lauren," I said softly. Silence. "What about her?" "She's been visiting the apartment while I'm gone." "That's weird. Why would she do that?" His tone was uneasy, defensive. I almost pitied him. "That's what I'd like to know." He sighed. "Mom, I'm sure it's nothing. Maybe she wanted to surprise you, help with something." "Maybe," I said. "You ask her." Then we hung up, and I sat back staring at my reflection in the black TV screen. For the first time, I saw someone else staring back. Someone who wasn't frightened or broken, someone who had a plan. I didn't know exactly how it would unfold yet, but I knew this much. They had played their game long enough. Now, it was my turn. I began with small, deliberate moves, the kind that no one would notice unless they looked very closely. I changed the locks first, quietly, without mentioning it to Mark. The locksmith came while he was at work, and I told him it was a security concern, nothing more. When Mark got home that evening, he tried his key, frowned when it didn't fit, and looked at me.
"Oh," I said lightly, "I forgot to tell you. There was a problem with the old block. The building manager recommended replacing it." I smiled as if it were the most trivial thing in the world. He hesitated for a moment, then shrugged. "You should have told me." "You were busy," I replied, setting the table. That night, I slept without fear. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe in my own home. But safety was temporary. I knew that this was only the first step. The next day, I went to the bank. My hands trembled slightly as I requested access to our joint accounts. The woman behind the counter typed briskly, her nails clattering against the keyboard. "You've got 2 checking accounts and 1 savings. Anything specific you'd like to do today?" "Yes," I said. "I'd like to close the joint account and transfer my share into a personal one." She blinked. "Do you have your husband's authorization?" "No," I said calmly, "and I don't need it. I'm withdrawing only what's legally mine." My voice didn't shake. It was the first time in 23 years I had spoken without asking permission. By the time I left, I had a new debit card in my purse and a bank statement with only my name on it. That paper felt heavier than gold. When I got home, the apartment felt different, charged, like the air before a storm. There was an envelope on the counter, no return address. I opened it with a kitchen knife. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Stop this. You don't know what you're doing." My hands went cold. I looked around the room, half expecting to see someone watching me, but the apartment was empty, silent. Then I noticed the paper smelled faintly of perfume. Her perfume. Lauren's. I sat down, gripping the edges until they dug into my skin. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a challenge. She knew I was moving, and she wanted me to stop. That evening, I said nothing to Mark. I cooked dinner as usual, smiled when he made small talk, laughed at a joke I didn't hear. But inside, I was memorizing every expression, every word, every glance he gave me. When he went to bed, I checked his phone. He'd changed the passcode. The next morning, Lauren called me. Her tone was sweet, almost mocking. "Emily, hi. I just wanted to check if you got my little gift. I left something on the counter." I said nothing. "Emily?" "Yes," I finally said. "I got it." "Oh, good," she purred. "I was worried it might get lost. Anyway, we should have coffee sometime, just the 2 of us. Clear the air." "Sure," I said, my voice even. "Let's do that." We met at a cafe the next day. She arrived looking flawless, hair perfect, dress pressed, lipstick immaculate. She looked like the picture of innocence, but her eyes told a different story. "Emily," she said, sitting down,
I feel like there's tension between us. I don't want that. We're family. I stirred my coffee slowly. You've been in my home without permission, multiple times. She smiled faintly. Oh, come on. You gave me a key to help Daniel. I said, not to sneak around when I'm gone. Her smile widened. Sneak around? That's such an ugly phrase. Maybe you're just imagining things. I leaned forward, my voice calm, controlled. I saw you, Lauren, on camera. For the first time, her smile faltered. A small crack, but it was enough. She blinked, looked away briefly, then back. Then you should delete it, she said softly, for your own good. I met her gaze. I already did. She studied me, searching for weakness. When she found none, she picked up her bag and stood. You're making a mistake. You don't know who you're dealing with. Neither do you, I replied. She left without another word. That night, I found Mark waiting for me in the living room. The lights were dim, his face unreadable. Lauren called me. He said, "What the hell are you doing?" Protecting myself, I said quietly. From what? From your own imagination? From the truth. He stepped closer, his jaw tight.
You're losing it, Emily. You need help. I almost laughed. You mean help forgetting? Help pretending you haven't been lying to me? His eyes hardened. You're making a mess you can't clean up. Then stop me. For a moment, I thought he might, but instead he turned, grabbed his coat, and slammed the door behind him. When the silence settled, I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I was weak, but because I knew what came next. They would regroup, plan, come back stronger, but I was ready. The next morning, I called Susan again. I need a consultation, I said, about property separation. Are you sure? She asked. Completely. That weekend, I drove to the coast alone. I rented a small cottage, brought my laptop, my notes, my proof. I spent 2 days there in total silence, walking along the shore, listening to the waves, sorting through everything I had gathered. It was the first peace I'd felt in months. By the time I drove home, my plan was clear. No more hesitation, no more fear. They had played their games in the dark. Now I would bring everything into the light. 3 days after Mark stormed out, he came back calm, polite, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. He placed them in a vase without asking where we stood, without mentioning the argument, as if the air between us hadn't turned poisonous. I thought we could talk, he said, his tone carefully neutral, about everything. All right, I said, motioning for him to sit. He did. His movements slow, cautious, the way you would approach an animal you once owned but weren't sure would bite now. He started softly. Emily, I know things have been tense. I should have been more patient with you. You've been under a lot of stress, and maybe Mrs. Caldwell's gossip made things worse. But I want us to move past it. Together. I looked at him, at his perfectly rehearsed expression, contrition painted over calculation. Is that what Lauren told you to say? The briefest flicker crossed his face, surprise, then irritation. Lauren doesn't control what I say. She controlled everything else, I replied. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. You're making this into something it isn't. No, I said quietly. I'm finally making it into what it is. He sat back, exhaled, forced a laugh. You've always had an imagination. You used to write stories, remember? Maybe you've just... Stop, I interrupted. You don't get to rewrite this one. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The lilies between us filled the silence with their cloying scent. Finally, he stood up. You want space? Fine. But don't make me the villain in your fantasy. As he left, I thought, too late. That evening, Lauren called. Her voice was bright, too bright. Emily, and so glad Mark talked to you. I think it's time we all had dinner together like a family. Let's not let misunderstandings ruin everything. Dinner sounds nice, I said. When? Tomorrow, our place, 7 o'clock? Perfect, I said, and hung up. The next day, I arrived exactly on time. Lauren opened the door in a soft blue dress, barefoot, holding a glass of wine. I'm so happy you came, she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of expensive perfume and deceit.
Mark was already there, pouring drinks, smiling like a man determined to erase history. Daniel was too, nervous, fidgeting, unaware he was sitting in a nest of vipers. Dinner was civil at first. The conversation danced around neutral topics: weather, work, Daniel's promotion. Then Lauren leaned forward, resting her chin on her hand. You know, Emily, I've been thinking about that whole camera situation. It must have been such a misunderstanding. Maybe one of the cleaners. I didn't hire a cleaner, I said softly. Her smile didn't falter. Right. I mean, maybe Mark. I didn't, Mark said quickly, glancing at me, then her. Then maybe someone else had a copy of the key, she offered sweetly. I set down my fork. Maybe someone did. The silence that followed was dense, heavy. Daniel looked from one face to another, confusion in his eyes. What are we talking about? Nothing, Mark said sharply. Something, I corrected. Lauren stood up, forcing a laugh. You know what? I think we're all just tired. Emily, let's not dig up the past. The past keeps digging itself up. Every Tuesday, to be exact. Her smile froze. Mark's voice hardened. Enough. I looked at him. You want enough? Then tell him. I gestured toward Daniel. Tell your son who you really are, or I will. Mark's face drained of color. Lauren's hand flew to his arm, gripping it. Emily,
You don't want to do this. Think of your family. My family? I said. You mean the one you've been dismantling piece by piece? Daniel stood abruptly. What the hell is going on? Mark turned to him, his tone desperate. It's not what she thinks, Lauren added quickly. She's been under stress. She's imagining things. You know how she gets. I laughed, a short, sharp sound that made them both flinch. You should have deleted that email, Mark, the one you wrote to her. I think we should slow down. Remember? Lauren's hand slipped from his arm. Daniel's eyes widened. Dad? Mark's lips moved, but no words came out. I stood. Enjoy your dinner. I left before they could stop me. My hands shook, but I felt strangely calm, like someone who had just finished the hardest part of a long climb. Outside, the night air was cooled, the stars sharp above the rooftops. I breathed deeply, feeling something close to power. At home, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in the dark, letting the silence settle. I thought about what I'd seen, their faces, their fear. It wasn't victory yet, but it was the first sign of cracks. Over the next few days, they didn't contact me. Not a word. It was almost peaceful. I used the time to gather everything. Printed copies of emails, text messages, even financial records showing withdrawals from our joint account to a mysterious consultant that turned out to be Lauren's cousin. Every document went into a folder marked "For Susan." By the end of the week, I had a complete picture, not just of the affair, but of the manipulation, the slow erosion of my finances, the lies, the false sympathy. They hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. They had been dismantling my life while smiling to my face. One night, as I sat at my desk reviewing the papers, I realized how quiet I felt. Not numb, not bitter, just clear. The kind of calm that comes after a long storm when you finally understand its shape. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was noisy, and I needed silence to win. When Mark finally texted, "We need to talk," I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "Not yet." He called, but I didn't answer. Lauren tried too. I let the phone ring. Each vibration a reminder that they were the ones chasing now. They wanted me back in their web. They wanted the old Emily, confused, emotional, forgiving. But she was gone, and what had replaced her was colder, stronger, patient. The woman they'd underestimated was about to become the one thing they feared most, someone who had nothing left to lose. The silence after exposure was almost unbearable. A week passed without a single knock on my door. No calls from Mark, no text from Lauren. Even Daniel had gone quiet. At first, I thought I wanted peace. But peace, I learned, can feel like isolation when you've been living inside chaos. I spent long hours walking the neighborhood, headphones in, pretending to listen to music, but really just listening to the sound of my own thoughts. On one of those walks, I saw her.
Mrs. Caldwell, standing by the mailboxes, her sharp eyes scanning the hallway. "Emily," she said, with that peculiar mix of warmth and judgment that only elderly women seem to master. "I was beginning to wonder if you'd moved away." "Not yet," I said, with a small smile. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I heard there was a bit of drama." "Word travels fast." "It always does," she replied. "But don't let them make you the villain, dear. People like them," she paused, glancing down the hall. "They're good at wearing masks. You're not the first woman in this building who's been made to feel crazy." Her tone shifted, softening just slightly. "Come by for tea sometime. I make a mean lemon cake." For the first time in weeks, I felt something unexpected. Connection.
2 days later, I did go. Her apartment smelled like old wood and jasmine. She poured tea, served the cake, and listened. Not the polite kind of listening, but the quiet, still kind that comes from someone who has known her own version of betrayal. "My husband," she said at one point, "used to disappear every Thursday, claimed it was poker night. Turned out it was his secretary." I smiled faintly. "What did you do?" "I let him play his game," she said, her voice cool. "Then I made sure the cards were marked." We both laughed, a low, knowing sound. When I left her apartment, something inside me had shifted. It wasn't forgiveness or closure, it was strength. She reminded me that I wasn't alone, that women like us survive by watching, by waiting, by knowing when to strike. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. The following afternoon, just as I was about to leave for groceries, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, Mark stood there holding a bottle of wine. Lauren was beside him, smiling too sweetly. My stomach tightened. "What do you want?" "To talk," Mark said. "Just talk." Lauren nodded. "We all said things we regret. Maybe it's time to move forward." Their voices were soft, conciliatory, the same melody predators use when they're too tired to chase. "All right," I said, stepping aside. "Come in." They sat at the dining room table like actors in a poorly written play. Mark poured wine into 3 glasses, handed me one. I didn't touch it. Lauren started. "Emily, I know you've been hurt. We both made mistakes, but destroying this family won't make you feel better." I tilted my head. "Destroying this family? I'm not the one who started digging." Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. "We can fix this. We just need to trust each other again." I laughed softly. "Trust? You mean the kind that disappears every Tuesday?" He looked up sharply. "Enough!" Lauren's eyes flashed, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "Please, Emily, let's be adults about this. You can't keep holding on to resentment. It'll eat you alive." Her words were so perfectly rehearsed that for a second I almost admired the effort. "Resentment," I said. "No, I call it memory." Lauren's jaw tightened. "You don't know everything." "Then enlighten me." Mark stood, his tone turning firm. "Emily, listen, we all made mistakes. You can't punish everyone forever." I rose too, my voice cold, deliberate. "I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting myself." Lauren's facade cracked. "You think you can just erase us, make us disappear?" I smiled faintly. "No, Lauren, you'll do that yourself." Mark slammed his glass onto the table. "This is insane." The wine splashed across the white lilies in the vase, the same kind he'd brought days ago. Red on white. It looked almost symbolic. "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'm insane with evidence." Lauren grabbed her bag, her face pale. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I already regret knowing you," I replied. They left without another word, the sound of the door closing behind them echoing like a gunshot. When the silence returned, I felt my heart beat slow. There was fear, yes, but it was a clean fear, sharp and bracing. It didn't weaken me, it steadied me.
Later that evening, I walked to Mrs. Caldwell's again. She didn't ask questions, just handed me tea and let me sit. "You look like you've seen ghosts," she said. I did, and they were alive. She chuckled softly. "Then it's time to bury them." That night, I opened my notebook and began to write again. Not lists, this time, but statements. Clear, factual, indisputable. Dates, actions, conversations. I started building a record not just for the lawyers, but for myself. A map of how far I had come and how far I was willing to go. For the first time, the act of writing didn't feel like desperation. It felt like purification. Each word took away a little of their power and returned it to me. By midnight, I closed the notebook and whispered to the empty room, "They think I'm scared." The apartment seemed to hum in response, quiet and steady. "I'm not scared," I said again, louder, and for the first time, I believed it. It happened on a Thursday. The day started like any other, gray sky, faint drizzle, the city moving in its quiet rhythm. I woke early, made coffee, and stood by the window, watching the streetlights fade. There was something electric in the air, something inevitable. I didn't plan what would happen that day, but maybe it had been building toward this all along. By noon, I had a call from Susan. She said, "I filed the initial motion. They'll be served next week." I replied, "Thank you."
My voice was steady, detached. "Emily," she added gently, "once this starts, you can't go back." "I don't want to." I hung up and looked around the apartment, the place that had held both my worst humiliation and my rebirth. Everything was in order. The cameras were gone, the proof was hidden. I was ready. At 3 p.m., there was a knock. Not polite, not hesitant, firm, deliberate. I opened the door. Mark stood there, his face pale, jaw tight. Lauren was behind him, eyes red from crying or pretending to. "Can we come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. "Of course. It's been a while since Tuesday." He didn't answer. They sat on the couch, looking smaller than I remembered them. Mark cleared his throat. "Susan called me," he said. "She told me about the petition." "Good," I said. "That saves me the trouble." "Emily," Lauren began, "this is going too far. Divorce, legal action. What are you trying to prove?" "That actions have consequences," I said. Mark leaned forward. "You're ruining everything. The house, the finances. Daniel will never forgive you." I smiled slightly. "Daniel already knows." They froze. "I told him yesterday," I said. "He didn't believe me at first, but he will. He'll see the emails, the recordings. He'll see what kind of people you both are." Lauren's composure cracked. "You wouldn't." "I already did." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked at Mark, desperate, but he was staring at me with something that wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "The truth?" I said simply. "Say it. Right here, right now." He hesitated, his face hardening. "It's over, Emily. There's no point." "Say it." "Fine," he snapped. "Yes, I was with her. It happened. All right." Lauren interrupted, her voice trembling. "Don't do this, Mark." He turned to her. "Don't what? Lie again? Pretend this didn't happen? You promised." "I promised a lot of things," he said bitterly. "None of them worked." I watched in silence. There it was, the confession, raw and ugly. The two of them unraveling under the weight of their own words. Lauren stood up suddenly, pacing. "You think you've won, don't you?" she said, turning to me. "You think this makes you better. You were never enough for him, Emily. That's why he came to me." I didn't flinch. "Then why are you shaking?" She froze. Her hand, still holding her wine glass, trembled. "Because you've turned this into a nightmare," she shouted. "You won't let it go. You're obsessed." "Maybe, but at least I don't need to lie to breathe." Mark slammed his hand against the table. "Stop it, both of you." His voice cracked.
You've turned this into hell. I looked at him, calm as ice. No, Mark, you did that years ago. I just turned on the lights. He stared at me, eyes wild, like a man realizing he was already trapped. You think anyone will believe you? They don't have to. The evidence speaks for itself. Lauren's voice dropped to a whisper. You'll regret this, Emily. You don't know how cruel I can be. Oh, I do. I've watched you practice. She went silent. Mark rubbed his face, his voice low, exhausted. You've destroyed everything. I stood. No, I destroyed the illusion. There's a difference. The rain outside began to pour harder, a steady, relentless sound against the windows. For a moment, none of us spoke. The storm outside felt like an echo of the one inside this room, unstoppable, cleansing. Finally, Lauren grabbed her purse. Come on, Mark, she's insane. He didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on me. You planned all this? Yes, and that's why it worked. He stood slowly, his shoulders sagging. You'll be alone, Emily. You'll end up with nothing. I looked him in the eye. Nothing is better than living in your lie. They left together, slamming the door so hard, the frame shook. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the quiet that followed. It wasn't peace, exactly. More like the after. The kind that comes after a storm when the air is still thick, charged with what's been broken. I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the table. My hands weren't shaking, my heart wasn't racing. I felt empty, but it was a clean, pure emptiness, like the space left behind after you throw something toxic away. Later that evening, Daniel called. His voice was soft, confused. Mom, I talked to Dad, and he admitted it all of it. I don't know what to say. I said, say nothing. Just live your life differently than he did. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, I'm proud of you. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the rain-streaked window. My reflection stared back, calm, unflinching, unfamiliar. For the first time, I realized what victory looked like. Not joy, not relief, just the absence of fear. The masks were gone, the truth was out, and what was left was mine. The court hearing came faster than anyone expected. Mark had tried to delay it, his lawyer filing motion after motion to stall, to intimidate.
But Susan was better. Quiet, sharp, and utterly ruthless. She prepared every document, every timestamp, every photograph. I didn't even need to speak much. The evidence spoke for me. When the day came, I dressed simply. Black suit, hair pulled back, no jewelry. I wanted to look like the truth itself. Calm, unadorned, undeniable. Lauren sat 2 rows behind Mark, pretending she wasn't there for him. She wore a gray dress, her face carefully composed, her hands twisting the hem of her sleeve, but her eyes betrayed her, darting, anxious, brittle. Mark's lawyer spoke first, painting him as a victim of emotional instability. He said I had become paranoid, that my imaginations had turned destructive. I sat still, eyes forward, every breath measured. Then Susan stood. Mrs. Grant, she said, would you please describe what you found on your home security camera? I did. Calmly. Precisely. No embellishment. Did you ever give your daughter-in-law permission to enter your home when you were away? No. Did you confront her? Yes. And her response? She told me I was imagining things. Susan handed the judge the printed screenshots. These are time-stamped videos from the defendant's home. They clearly show the same individual entering her residence multiple times without consent. Mark's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off. The images were irrefutable. When it was Mark's turn to testify, he avoided my eyes. He spoke of misunderstandings, of temporary lapses, of regret, but the words sounded hollow, practiced. When Susan cross-examined him, she asked, did you ever write this email? And placed the printed copy of his unsent draft on the table. He stared at it for a long time, then said quietly, yes. Lauren looked down,
her face drained of color. By the time it was over, the court ruled in my favor. Full ownership of the apartment, half of all joint assets, and a legal restriction preventing either of them from contacting me again. Mark's lawyer muttered something about appeals, but even he knew it was pointless. Outside, reporters from a local news outlet had gathered, curious about the suburban betrayal case. I ignored them. I walked past Mark and Lauren without a glance. They stood together on the courthouse steps, defeated, small, stripped of the arrogance that had once defined them. For a brief moment, I almost pitied them. Then I remembered the envelope in my drawer, the smell of Lauren's perfume in my home, the sound of Mark calling me crazy. The pity died before it could take shape. That night, I opened a bottle of wine, the one I'd saved since our 20th anniversary. I poured a glass, sat by the window, and let the city lights blur through the glass. The victory didn't feel triumphant. It felt clean. Over the next few weeks, the aftermath unfolded like slow theater. Mark moved into a rented apartment across town. The company where he worked discovered he had been misusing funds. Small amounts, but enough to make them look closer. Within a month, he was forced to resign. Lauren's world collapsed even faster. Words spread, not about the affair, but about the emails, the secret entries, the manipulation. She lost her teaching job at the university after someone forwarded the video to the department head. The scandal wasn't public, but it didn't need to be. Academia thrives on quiet destruction. I didn't lift a finger. I didn't have to. Truth, once released, moves on its own. One afternoon, I received a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Mark's. Emily, I hope you're satisfied. You've taken everything. I'm living in a motel now. Daniel won't return my calls. Lauren's gone. I don't even blame you anymore. You were right about everything. I just didn't think you'd go this far. I suppose you won. I folded the letter neatly and slid it into the drawer. I didn't need to reply. The following weekend, Daniel visited. He looked tired, older somehow, as if the whole ordeal had aged him overnight. He hugged me for a long time. I don't know how you did it, he said quietly. I stopped pretending, I said. He nodded. He's moving to Florida, said he wants a fresh start. Good for him. And Lauren? She made her choices. He studied me for a moment. You're different now. I'm free, I said. He smiled sadly. That's the same thing, I guess. After he left, I sat in the quiet apartment, the late afternoon sun pouring in through the windows. Everything looked the same walls, the same furniture, but it all felt new. It was mine again. Later, I walked down to the lobby to check my mail. Mrs. Caldwell was there, of course. She looked over me with a small, knowing smile. So, you finally cleaned house. I smiled faintly. Something like that. She leaned closer. Good. They never expect women like us to win. I laughed softly. Then they should start learning. When I returned upstairs, I looked out over the city again. The lights flickered on one by one, steady and quiet. I thought about the person I'd been just months ago, frightened, uncertain, apologizing for existing. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone sharper, colder, stronger. It wasn't happiness I felt.
It was justice, the kind that doesn't ask for applause, only silence. Mark and Lauren had built their world on lies. I had torn it down with truth, and the ruins suited them perfectly. It's strange how silence changes shape. Months ago, it was heavy, suffocating. Now it feels light, deliberate, chosen. The world hasn't changed. I have. It's been almost half a year since the trial. The days have found a rhythm again. Not joy, but peace. I wake early, open the curtains, and let the morning light spill across the kitchen floor. The apartment feels different now, as if it finally recognizes me as its rightful owner. I've started teaching writing classes at the local community center. It began as something small, a volunteer program for women rebuilding their lives. Some of them come from divorce, some from loss, others from silence deeper than mine. I never tell them my full story. I don't need to. They see it in the way I listen, in the steadiness of my voice. On Tuesdays, I still make coffee around 1, a quiet ritual.
Sometimes I catch myself glancing toward the door out of habit, but no one comes anymore. The locks have been changed, the ghosts exorcised. Tuesday has become just another day. Daniel visits more often now. He brings me photos of his new apartment, stories about his coworkers, and sometimes just silence. We sit together without needing to fill it. The wound between us has become a scar, visible but healed. He doesn't talk about his father much. The last I heard, Mark sold what was left of his car and moved down to Florida, a small town near the coast. He sends the occasional email, polite, detached. I read them, then archive them without replying. I don't hate him anymore. Hate requires energy, and I've given him enough of mine already. Lauren, I hear, is still in town. She works part-time at a real estate office. Or maybe she doesn't anymore. Rumors blur with time. Once I saw her from across the street. She looked thinner, older. Her posture had changed, shoulders drawn inward like someone perpetually bracing for impact. Our eyes met for a second. She froze, then looked away. I didn't. I just watched her walk past, hurried, tense, and felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, just a quiet recognition. Some debts repay themselves. Mrs. Caldwell still greets me in the hallway, though her steps are slower now. We share small exchanges, weather, neighbors, the endless repairs this building always seems to need. Sometimes she gives me her knowing smile, the kind that says she remembers everything but doesn't need to say it out loud. Life has grown smaller, simpler. I tend to plants on the windowsill, I read before bed, I walk by the lake on weekends. There's a peace in ordinariness, something I once thought I'd never want again. But every so often, I'll catch my reflection in the glass, in the mirror, the shop window, the darkened TV screen, and I barely recognize her. The woman staring back isn't afraid or fragile or waiting for someone else to tell her what's true. Her eyes are steady, her mouth calm. Freedom, I've learned, doesn't look like celebration. It looks like stillness. One evening, I drove out to the edge of the city, to the same spot where Mark and I used to stop on road trips, a quiet overlook above the river. The place hadn't changed much. Same wooden railing, same hum of traffic below. I stood there for a while, the wind tugging at my hair, the sky deepening into gold. For the first time, I let myself think about everything. Not the pain, but the journey through it. How it began with a single question in a hallway. How that question had unstitched an entire life. Do you know who comes to your apartment every Tuesday? I smiled at the memory, not bitterly, but with a strange gratitude. That sentence had burned my world down. Yes, but it also built the one I live in now. The sun slipped below the horizon, painting the river in amber and shadow. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply. The air smelled of rain and distant pine. When I opened my eyes, the sky had turned violet. The city lights flickered on one by one, tiny constellations, each steady and small. On the drive home, I passed the old cafe where Lauren and I used to stop, where she'd smiled and told me I was imagining things. The sign was gone, the windows boarded, the building had been sold. For a moment, I thought about stopping, but I didn't. Some places deserve to stay closed. At home, I poured myself tea and sat by the window.
The city outside was quiet, calm. Inside, everything smelled faintly of lavender. I took my notebook from the drawer, the same one I'd filled during those dark months. I flipped to the last page, the one still blank, and for the first time, I knew exactly what to write. Tuesday, 6:47 p.m. No visitors, no ghosts, just me. I closed the notebook, feeling the faint tremor of finality. Down in the courtyard, I saw Mrs. Caldwell locking her mailbox. She looked up, spotted me, and gave a small nod. I returned it, smiling faintly. The world kept moving. Buses, footsteps, the quiet hum of living. And in that motion, I found my peace. The war was over. They had lost everything that made them who they were: control, image, illusion. And I had lost only what never truly belonged to me. No happy ending, no tragedy either. Just truth, clean, sharp, and final. The kind that doesn't fade with time. The kind you build a new life on.